Hi, I'm really, really glad to be back in this venue. I love coming into this venue. And today I'm going to be talking more with you than to you about the costs of the cult of expertise. But what I really want to talk to you about is part of a larger conversation about whether or not we're judging skill appropriately in technology. And I'll start by giving you a bit of background about myself. My name's Jessica Rose. I'm from the States quite a while ago, but based here in the UK now. So I spend a lot of my time apologizing for being very chirpy and very excited. I usually give this talk in sort of the hangover keynote slot when everybody's really docile and placid. So I hope like late afternoon, you're all full of biscuits and very, very chill. And I've already mentioned that my background's in education. So I was a linguist and a language teacher for quite a long time. And I'd spend a lot of time, maybe a silly amount of time, thinking about the way we talk to each other in technology. When you talk about expertise and what it means to be an expert, just getting to stand up in front of you and say, oh, I know things about things, kind of lets me dictate a lot of what I think into the conversation. So there's going to be some very teacher-like interactivity in parts of this where I want you to go ahead and yell at me, tell me what you think. The camera is not pointed at any of you, so nobody can see your face, which is possibly going to be valuable for some of the polling around employers. If you're not comfortable raising your hand like this, go ahead and just put your hand up like that if you want to be like, oh, it's terrible. And I'm actually working with Dream Factory right now as the head of developer relations for an open source project. Does anybody know what developer relations is? Developer relations is a completely insane job that probably shouldn't exist, but it's amazing. I spend all of my time sort of on the road, traveling to conferences and talking to people about what they're building and what they're doing and what they need and what's broken in technology, not with this. This works fine, mostly. But before I did this, I did a lot of work with talent and technology. So I did a lot of consulting with one-on-one mentorship for folks who wanted to move into tech. But I also talked to teams and I talked to companies who wanted to change their recruitment policies. And because I do a lot of work one-on-one with underrepresented folks in tech, I found very quickly that I was getting a bunch of companies that had sort of grown to a specific size. They got 20, 30, 40 people, and they were like, we don't have a lot of diversity in our team. Can you bring us a diverse candidate, please? And sometimes it was really genuine, like, hey, we want more perspectives on our team. We're really looking to support someone. And sometimes I'll admit it was a little bit like, well, we should probably hire somebody who isn't a white guy so nobody fusses at us. And you got very different outcomes out of both of those. But what got me giving this talk is an experience I had with a company where they came to me and said, you know what, Jess, we want you to bring us a developer. And they were lovely. This was such a nice team. They brought me into their office. They had like really nice biscuits, if that's any judge of an office. And I was like, Jess, we really want you to bring us a developer. Can you bring us with somebody with 3 years of .NET? And I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's easy enough. And they just kept bringing the biscuits. So I think I'm going to bring them somebody gorgeous. They're going to be a good place for them. Look at all these biscuits. Everything's great. And they kept talking because that's not a job description by itself. And they said, well, we also want to make sure they've got at least 2-3 years with C#. And this still felt really sane. Yeah, .NET, C#. I can do that. We can bring you a bunch of people who do that. And they kept talking. They said, well, you know what? We want to make sure they're really great with Photoshop. And these people are super nice, and the biscuits are really nice, and everything in the office seems like it's running okay. So I think they probably know what they're talking about. Maybe they've got a specific candidate in mind. And I go to continue eating the biscuits, but at the same time going, oh, are you thinking of a specific person? But they weren't done talking. So do you know what? We want to make sure they're really, really solid with .NET. We want to make sure they're comfortable with C#. We want them to have really great Photoshop experience. And it kind of sounded like they wanted you to have your own Photoshop license. We want them to be great at the front end as well. And this is when I had put the biscuit down and I was making a little bit of a quiet, high-pitched sound because they haven't stopped talking, and all of these are completely essential to them. Like, yeah, they absolutely need to be able to handle the front end. They need to do this .NET, and they weren't done talking. Like, also, let's have this. And I was trying to be really polite because they had given me some really, I hate to come back to this, exceptional biscuits. And they had also promised to give me a large pile of money. And these are two things that I'm really motivated by. But they weren't done talking. So I'm kind of trying to find a polite, very British way to say, no. Said, okay, .NET, C#, great graphic design, great front end, all this. They should probably be able to go ahead and get us they should be able to act as our Scrum Master, ideally. And looking at this, as you can tell, this is a junior role. So we're looking to pay, I don't know, like 18 to 22,000 pounds. And I really can't possibly tell you how nice these biscuits were. Because I was still really looking to be polite at this point, where I was like, oh, you know, I think, and you never want to tell someone they're wrong. Does anybody do client-facing work? Who has to deal with, yeah, I love the grim face. For those of you watching on the video, there was a lot of, I never like to tell people directly they're wrong. So I decided they were really, really motivated on getting a female team member in. So I decided to talk to them about the structure of this job listing instead of talking to them about how maybe they've lost their damn fool minds. So I started addressing the structure first. Well, I was like, you know what? Checklists are not always a really good way to identify talent, to identify expertise. And I'd seen this Forbes article all over the place, and they were like, well, the Forbes article is saying that women tend to apply for roles when they meet 60% of the requirement. Men tend to apply for roles when they meet 60% of the requirements, and women wait until they meet 100%. But this is a really, really fluffy quote, so I decided to dig into the source. And that's from an HP internal application data set, where they said, you know what, we found people putting themselves forward for promotions. Women didn't put themselves forward until they met all of the listed requirements perfectly, or did better than that. And guys had a little more common sense. Well, common sense as it relates to job applications. I think we operate on different scripts sometimes. So women saw, as a whole in the HP data set, saw these lists as absolute requirements, where it looks like male applicants were like, well, mostly halfway, I can do that. And you got very, very different abilities to do this. But I'm being kind of snarky at this point, because they come back and they say, no, this checklist stays. All of this is essential. And the biscuits are good, but they're not that good. So a little bit harder. I was like, well, you know, there's probably absolutely no way you will fill this role. The region we're in, I do know somebody. I do know a female developer that fits this profile, but she's amazing and not junior. I'd kind of expect to see you pay this specific person, I don't know, maybe 3-4 times that for your completely bonkers list of demands. But I don't say things like bonkers or lost your damn fool mind because, again, biscuits and a giant pile of money. So I start saying, well, you know, I do know someone who fits the profile. And they stop me. They say, well, we've actually had an unsolicited applicant who met all of these requirements. So we're not being unreasonable. You can bring us more of those. And we're not in a massive city at this point. We're in a undisclosed British city. Yeah. And just off, does anybody have sort of a very generic women's first name for me to use? Suzanne. So very cautiously, I'm like, was the application from Suzanne? Yeah, it was from Suzanne. You know what, we had her come in and we had her interview. I was like, okay, well, I appreciate the biscuits, but I'm not getting your pile of money. I mean, all you have to do is give her 3 or 4 times as much money and you're done. All right, I'll just take these with me and go. I says, well, No, Suzanne came in, and of course we interviewed her, but her interview style was terrible. She just doesn't have the skill set to do this. She wasn't confident in her answers. She didn't seem prepared. And we did some pair programming with her, up on the whiteboard. I was like, because pair programming on the whiteboard is a thing? And she just did a terrible job. So we don't want her, but we want somebody like her, but better. And this was fine. I went away and I thought, oh, good for you all. And completely forgot they existed. But got a call back a couple weeks later to be like, hey, by the way, don't worry about that job. I was like, I am not worried about your job. We've actually gone ahead and hired someone. I was like, okay, did you go back to Suzanne? Did you give her a giant pile of money and is everyone happy? Like, no, we got this guy who's a recent graduate. He graduated a couple months ago. But he's really good. He really did solidly in interviews. He really sounded like we expect. Who didn't have 3 years of .NET experience. He might have had a license for Photoshop. But when it came down to it, they weren't looking for any of the requirements on their must-have list. They were looking for someone who sounded like what they expected and presented themselves as having the expertise. So I very quietly hung up the phone, because it's that gesture now, and put it down and went to get my own nice biscuits quietly and never speak to them again. And it really got me thinking about how we define expertise in technology. And here, this is the part where I'm going to go ahead and have you yell at me. So anybody who's especially shy, I'm not going to call on you. But how do you think we define expertise in technology communities or in roles? What makes somebody an expert to your peers?
Years of experience.
Years of experience.
Yelling the loudest.
Yelling the loudest. Years of experience, yelling the loudest. Certifications. Cool. Anybody else? Y'all are way less shy than the conference I usually do. One more time.
Dedicated repository.
The code you've got available for people to have a look at. Public profiles. Stack Overflow. How long you're willing to endure Stack Overflow conversations? That was undiplomatic. Stack Overflow is great. Age happens a lot in 2 different ways as well.
Domain knowledge.
Domain knowledge. Anything else?
Speaking.
Sorry? Intuition, yeah, sort of the ability to navigate the public speaking. So I speak in a lot of cross-community conferences, and I'm generally fairly happy and I'm generally fairly relaxed. So every now and again, somebody will come up afterwards and offer me a job I couldn't possibly do. It's like, hey, yeah, we really liked that you did this talk for this Ruby conference. You know what? You really had a good grasp of the terminology. You want to come and write Ruby for us? Just because somebody's able to say the thing, they don't really know. They don't necessarily know the thing. And this one's going to be a 1, 2, 3, and I want all of you to yell at me yes or no at the same time. Do you think we're valuing skills accurately? Do you think as an industry we're really weighing up people's skills in a fair way? Give me a 1 and a 2 and a... No. In case that was jumbled for the video, there was 2 really, really polite people going, oh, yeah, I think, oh. And I really like a personal example for this. So very cautiously, I promise the video can't see your faces, but who's ever left a company or left a project? You can raise your hand like that as well. Who left a project or left a company because you weren't properly being appreciated? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, freaking everybody. 75% of people, I think. We got one who's like, a little bit, sort of, mostly. Yeah, so the idea that we're valuing expertise, we're valuing skill, isn't really an academic question. It's something that has massive costs. I talked about people being involved in the recruitment process, bringing out fancy biscuits and giant piles of money. It costs an incredible amount of money to hire talent. So who here is on a team right now that's hiring? Cool. Keep your hands up. We're going to do a long, arduous thing. Who's been hiring for the same role for more than a month? More than 3 months? More than 6 months? More than a year? What are y'all doing? So we've got not only massive costs in recruitment financially, it doesn't just cost an incredible amount of money to bring people in, but you've also got this incredible time cost. We're waiting for people. We're looking for people. And it just takes a massive amount of our energy. The core of what I want to talk about is the idea of sort of expertise versus skill. I think in technology quite a bit, expertise is the perception that you can do the thing. And I usually think of skill as the ability to actually do the thing. And that tends to get uncoupled really quickly. If you're a really great technical architect, why would it matter if you've had an article in Hacker News? If you're a high-level Java dev, why would I ever look at how many Twitter followers you have? When we're as employers looking for thought leadership or that was a bit sarcastic. When we're looking for thought leadership or expertise or leading voices in the industry, I think a lot of times what we wind up with is self-promotion. So the folks who are the most able to put themselves forward and say, hey, I'm wonderful at this, I'm the leading authority in that, I am the person to talk to about A, B, and C. Self-promotion isn't just a skill, it's an absolutely exhausting, draining skill. So if you're looking to hire somebody who does a lot of speaking, and absolutely hire people who do a lot of speaking, think about how much that costs them in time. When you're looking at hiring somebody who's great at self-promotion, are they in a role where that's important? I think a lot of times when we're talking specifically about teams and talent, we wind up with people who are amazing at interviews. Who here is amazing at interviews? I love that for folks on the video, the people who did raise their hands looked completely at peace with themselves. They're just like, yeah. Who here is kind of miserable at interviews? Yeah. Who here is miserable at interviews, but actually, quite honestly, you're pretty good at things? 75% less modest than a lot of crowds I've been talking to. You're like, well, I'm quite good. Have a think about why you're looking for this self-promotion. It's difficult to say, I want you to recreate the wheel every time you have to hire. But the way we interview people traditionally is stressful and unnecessary. That process where you give someone else a pen and ask them to give a third person a pen and ask somebody to sort of pair program by having them dictate what to write on a whiteboard, that's the worst thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. That's the biggest hyperbole I'm going to aim for today. Another thing I'm really, really interested in, who's identifying skill? So within technology, who are we having identify the thought leaders? Who gets to pick who speaks for us? So in the Java community, think of who sort of the leading voices are. Who do people look to for trends? Where did they come from? Who supports them? Why did they get to be the voice of the community or the voice of this segment of the industry? Is it because they're the best? Is it because they spent the most time giving back to the community? Or is it because they were identified by someone important or someone's important? I'm afraid that a lot of this talk is open-ended questions. One of the most challenging things about self-promotion and skill is that the people who often see themselves as the most skilled, to put it very diplomatically, might not always be the most skilled. Has anybody, I promise this is going somewhere, has anybody ever used lemon juice as invisible ink? Cool, for those of you who haven't, you just take lemon juice, write on it, and it's invisible till you hold it up to a light. A bank robber in the US back in the late 90s had covered his face with lemon juice and entered a bank in the afternoon, robbed the bank, left, and expressed an incredible amount of surprise at being arrested because he was invisible. And two researchers, Dunning and Kruger, who were at Cornell at the time, I like to imagine that they had this conversation, like they had breakfast together and they had the newspaper out. I've built a very rich inner scene. And they were aware that grant money is a thing. So where we would have been like, look at this, maybe like take a picture and put it on the internet. They were like, hey, Dunning. Yes, Kruger. Do you think that stupid people know they're stupid? Well, I'm not terribly sure, but let's go ahead and get a pile of grant money and let's test whether or not stupid people know they're stupid. And Dunning and Kruger, hence the Dunning-Kruger effect, were much nicer people than I am. So they said the unskilled. And to do this, they got about 2,500 people and they gave them an aptitude test. And the curve on the test is something very, very predictable. And I love getting to use this slide because quartile is an amazing underused word. So they said, well, you know what, this is what the scores were. But what they did is they took the test away from someone and then gave them a graph and said, okay, well, we're not going to give you your score yet. We just have to go and grade the test. But show me on this graph where you think you did relative to your peers. And I imagine that all of you would be shocked. But the less skilled you are, the more likely you are to artificially overestimate your own abilities. And actually, the more skilled you are, the more likely the people who are absolutely brilliant at this will dramatically underestimate their abilities. Right around here, you've got a decent chance. And this is the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect says that the unskilled have absolutely no idea that they're unskilled. Has anybody ever worked with someone like this? Also everyone. What's great is working with someone like this, did you ever get the idea that not only they didn't know what they were doing, but they weren't able to accurately value your skill set? That's absolutely true. The findings of this study said not only are the unskilled unable to see their own lack of skill, but they literally don't know what skill looks like. They cannot see skill in other people. So if you're constantly going, oh, these other people are so stupid, maybe have a quiet sit down and a think. And most frustrating, they found that people who were way down here, artificially inflating their own skill set, were able to move past their own lack of skill, but only if they decided to sort of engage with that on their own. You could never lead someone to understand that they were a bit thick, but if they came around to it on their own, they would be able to sort of work their way out of it. And I love the Dunning-Kruger effect because at the end of the day, it said lots of places of work and lots of communities are just doomed. It only takes one or two of those people to have everyone leave. And this has been a very, very sort of fluffy, quick look at different ideas around expertise. I'm going to go ahead and race through different looks at how teams and expertise work and how we're valuing it, and even some fixes, things that we can do, and take a look at it from the community perspective as well, before taking a very, very quick look at what we can do as individuals to find ourselves better valued. So looking at teams and expertise, if you're hiring or if you're in a position to influence hiring, especially if it's your own company, have a really critical look about what you actually need. So we had 4 or 5 people who've been hiring for the same role for over a year. If you feel comfortable, yell at me and tell me what you're hiring for if it's been for more than 3-4 months. It's a great opportunity for somebody in the front row to turn around and be like, I do that. Senior developers? Senior development roles? Anybody else hiring for anything other than senior developers where it's been a while? Scrum Master, architects. But what do you need them to do? You need them to run scrums. You need them to develop at a high level. You need them to architect the architecture. And it's really easy, it's really tempting to distill that down into, we want somebody with 5 years of experience on this and 4 years of experience on that with a degree in this thing. But have a really, really good idea of what you need from those skill sets. Are they going to be, as a Scrum Master, are you doing anything to determine whether or not they're going to be great at communicating? If you're looking for developers, are you looking at whether or not they are sharing credit in their past projects? Whether or not they're going to be maybe over there on the Dunning-Kruger saying, I'm amazing, I'm great, everyone else was holding me back. And this one's a slide I'm always a little bit hesitant around. Skilled, non-traditional talent will often carry additional value. So when I was dealing with companies and dealing with teams looking to fill in their talent, a lot of people And it's not an unkind thing. I don't think there's malice in it. As humans, being social animals, we look for value in ourselves. We're a little bit egotistical as mammals. We think we're great. Most of us are pretty great. When we look at other people, the people we like and the people we connect with are people that reflect our values back at us. People who went to the same schools, people who talk like us, people who think like us, people who present the same ideas. If somebody tells me their philosophy, their approach to development, and it sounds like my approach to development, these people must be brilliant because that's what I tell myself before I go to sleep at night. When you're looking for talent that's often overlooked, there's often additional skills that come with it. So looking for folks that have transitioned into technology as adults. So who here, not even as a job, who's done something aside from tech, either as a hobby or a role? I feel kind of bad for people who do. What other, have you ever gone ahead and found yourself drawing from that expertise? Who's used non-tech experiences to fix something in your tech projects? Yeah. Looking at people who have had different perspectives and had different experiences is going to bring an incredible amount of additional value. So within development roles, and this is of course a statistic pulled from the West Coast of the US, so it's probably not steady out here. They found developers were changing jobs every 24 months. The people were leaving their job every 24 months. But when they went ahead and skewed for statistics, they found that people who were leaving their jobs every 2 years were the people that employers were most likely to identify as looking like a developer. So younger men who had gone to a small list of good schools were job hopping at a much, much higher rate than people who were self-taught or people from less traditional backgrounds. So have a think about whether or not somebody who's been in a role for 5 years before coming to you is likely to going to be able to succeed longer term. When you've got people on your team, look at the process as well as the results. Y'all don't have to raise your hands for this, but if you can make a very, very snarky face, has anybody ever worked with someone who was really good at taking credit for other people's stuff? If you're a manager or if you're a project owner, if you're working with people under you, if you're managing people, those people will kill your team. I've left projects and I've left companies because somebody else was continually poaching the credit. Be a little bit sarcastic, be a little bit doubting when somebody says, well, I did this and I did that and I fixed the whole thing. Did you really? I see you've got a bunch of commits here, but are people having to go back and fix things? Are you constantly causing conflict with other people? Go ahead and dive into the process. How is it getting built? Not just the statistics at the end of the day. And this is really important because unrewarded talent will leave. I asked folks to raise their hand if they've left a project due to being underappreciated, and we saw about 75%. That's massive. 3/4 of the people in here have personally left a job because they weren't appreciated. Can you go ahead and hum? If that company had treated you well, those of you who said you had left a company because you were underappreciated, if you had been properly supported, do you think you'd still be in that role today? So I'm experimenting with the hum thing because it seems a little bit less tiring than this. It's also quite pretty. That's great. That's all very academic. Oh, these things are terrible for reasons. Look at non-traditional talent. None of this are things you haven't heard before. So how do you fix it? Ask someone to show you the thing. Ask someone to build something for you. Ask someone to test something for you. Ask someone to show you what they're doing instead of telling you about what they've done. And part of that's even being forgiving about people not sounding like what they know what they're talking about. It's so easy for people with the gift of gab to come up and really sort of fake their way through an interview. Oh yeah, the multi-threaded blah, 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 blah. No. On the flip side, has anybody ever, and again, you can just make a pained face, has anybody ever said something incredibly dumb that you knew better than in an interview because you were nervous? I haven't, ever, and it doesn't keep me awake at night. But that happens all the time. Going ahead and asking people first to show you. So a process I really like is bring somebody in for an interview and say, hey, first tell me about what you're really passionate about. Tell me what you're interested in now. And there, all I want to see is a drive. I don't care if we're doing API generation and they're really, really into containers. If there's that, I want to learn all this new stuff, that's the exact kind of drive I want to see on a team. After that, not a test, not necessarily a test, because tests are a bit miserable. A lot of projects will go ahead and give a small piece of paid contract work. And I think this is a really, really good way to test out, is this person able to do the thing? Some of the best projects I've seen around that offer paid contract work with someone coming and staying in office with them. Say, hey, let's go ahead and give you this small bit of a project. We think it'll take a week or two, but absolutely come in and hang out with us. Come and stay with us in the office and get to know the team. Because here you're also testing for group dynamics, not culture fit, because that's often a trick, but just to see, are they going to be a jerk? Are they going to leave their tea bags on the sink? And make sure you test for the skills you really need. Some of the best things I've seen coming into job descriptions and some of the best things I've seen around projects are people structuring it by time. So one of the best job descriptions I've seen recently was, hi, we are looking for somebody to come join us with this title. In the first 2 weeks, you're going to be doing this. Within the first 3 months, we want you to be able to do all these things. Within 6 months, we think you should be able to do this. But within a year, we'd really like to hear what you think you'd be doing in this role. And it was really open-ended, really collaborative, like, hi, in the first 2 weeks, so the starting skills, we need you to have this out of the box. And that was a really efficient way to say, this is sort of our minimum viable applicant. And then the ability to either do the 3 months or pick that up in the 3 months was a lot of flexibility. I'm a big fan of the idea that jerks are often what kill your organization. I think lots of times projects, they do absolutely fail on tooling and they do absolutely fail on money running out. But the thing I see killing momentum and killing motivation again and again is working with people who are just absolutely horrible to work with. This is my favorite thing to do, and you're only allowed to do this if you need a junior or an intern. And you need to go and get a junior and intern, and you need to be really nice to them. You need to assure them that they're not going to get fired for this, you're not testing them, and that they can be a little bit sassy if they want. When interviewing mid-level or senior people, I love bringing them into the office and having them pair program with somebody who's massively junior to them. And if you use the same intern again and again, eventually they'll get a little bit snarky and sort of go with it, kind of mess with them for fun. I'm going to ask all of you, because you're professionals and reasonable people, when you're in an interview, you're on your best behavior, right? There's a lot of, I'm not sure if I should be surprised. I'm not sure if you'll be surprised, but we should be surprised that this kind of interaction, you'll get a lot more yelling at people. So people coming in for an interview and straight up, why don't you know this? What are you doing? And just being really snarky and occasionally swearing, which is fine. Having a senior or mid-level person pair program with somebody they are likely to see as below them is an amazing way to weed out jerks. It's an amazing way to weed out people who are poor managers, and it's an incredible way to weed out people who can't be bothered communicating cleanly. The only thing I'm going to say there is you really, really have to let your junior person know that they're not going to get in trouble. But all of this is massively labor intensive. If you want to go ahead and build a little bit more merit into the front end of your application system, folks like Gap Jumpers, I don't work for them, they don't pay me. They do a blind auditions system for applicants. It's a really, really good way to go for, can you do the thing we need? So programs like this will work with employers to build a very, very small test around the skill set. And then applicants will go through this portal, take the test, and the employer only gets to see the top applicants by the test. You have no idea how old the applicants are. You have no idea whether or not they're male or female. You don't know their names. You don't know if they're a university graduate. You don't know if they're a high school dropout. When you select who you're going to interview, all you know is this is what their code looks like. This is how they approach the problem. This is what they did. And of course, you're never going to get rid of the difficult, weird human issues. But this gives you a great chance to sort of front load the application process in the beginning and come up with people who really are able to do the thing and might not have been the people you expected. I'm a massive community nerd. So companies are great. They give us the money to do the stuff we want to do. And quite often nice biscuits. But I'm really, really interested in the way communities deal with skill and expertise because it feels really democratic to me. When we look at the people we hold up in our communities, we've got an incredible chance to go, actually, I don't like you very much, and you're weird, and you're mean. This person's been doing quite a lot recently. I'm going to spend much more time paying attention to what they're doing. And I think technology communities are doing a lot of really, really interesting things. But I think that we need to be better prepared to look to sort of a more diverse series of perspectives. So very, very often in developer communities, we hear people talking about the way things are going to be next year, what's going to happen in 6 months. And it often sounds very much like the way we've been doing things for the past 100,000 years. I think by asking people who have really, really different perspectives, what do you want to happen? What do you think should happen? Where do you think we're going wrong? Which is quite difficult. Say, tell me what's broken about this community I love. Is a really, really interesting way not only to support more people and more accurately reward kudos, sort of expertise points, but also really get things that give our communities quite a bit more back. And part of that is we really deserve better heroes a lot of times. So there was just recently a gentleman on the Tor project who is not any longer a gentleman on the Tor project, who was removed for allegations of fairly serious misconduct against other technologists. And Tor did a really great write-up, a really great retrospective of, do you know what, this is what happened. And in writing about this project, this person on the project, they said, you're like, do you know what, we'd been aware for some time about rumors that really touched on these same issues. But this is really serious, we've had to remove them. And I thought, well, it's quite good that you've removed them from the project. But if there have been allegations of assault for quite some time, and y'all were aware that these were issues, could you have not done this before it was a liability? I think taking the time to look at the actual people we're holding up, having talented voices is incredible. Having talented voices they're actively encouraging, actively including, and not actively driving off other potentially equally valuable voices is something we absolutely deserve in our communities. And this is important because unrewarded talent will leave. Who's ever left an open source project or dev community because you weren't being valued? Not so many, wow. Is Java just much, much cuddlier than a lot of... There's like, no. Fixing this gets a little bit more difficult. So part of communities being democratic means you all get to collectively choose who's important, who you value, what voices are great. And the first thing I'd ask is be suspicious. Just like a hiring manager, you'd want them to go ahead and be a little bit suspicious of people who say they can do the thing but not demonstrating it. When somebody gets up on stage and says, I'm going to tell you all about what's important coming up in the next 6 months, ask yourself, who are they? Why are they here? Why do they get to determine what's important? If somebody's talking to you about whether or not we're valuing skill appropriately, have a little bit of a question about whether or not they have any idea what they're talking about. It's super easy to take the stage. Be a little bit suspicious of folks who do. And I think this is incredible, and it's really, really difficult to do. Look at where the value in your community is coming from. Who's ever gotten online to snark about an open source project that was not working properly right now? All right, lots of y'all are lying. Who's ever gone ahead and gone out of your way to send a note to somebody who's done something really well? Say, do you know what, this feature was amazing. Oh my God, did you go and do that documentation? I love you so much. Maybe, are most of y'all from London? Has London gotten much, much nicer since the last time I gave this talk? Last time I gave this talk, to be like, I complain all the time. I was like, hey, does anybody ever say any nice things? They're like, no, everything's terrible. Have a look at where the value's coming from. If you're on an open source project, not just who's pushing the commits, not just who's maintaining, but who's appropriately labeling issues, who's answering newbie questions, who is doing the documentation. A lot of open source projects, you don't get any sort of, you don't get any measurable, you don't get badges, you don't get recognition, you don't get titles from doing the docs. This is a side thing, but if we can find more ways to recognize the people doing our docs and making our projects usable, that would make me really, really happy. And also, highlight the incredible people in projects. So when you see something going really, really well, don't just offer feedback. It's really, really easy to say, hey, this was really good job. That's not actionable. So there's a project happiness packets where you can go ahead and through a curated, moderated system, because humans are great, but humans don't scale well, you could say to somebody working on an open source project, hi, I've seen your work around this feature or this fix. I really appreciate it. I use it for these reasons. You can go ahead and offer people either anonymous or non-anonymous valuable constructive feedback. When you use something every day, when you see something fixed immediately, when you get an email back quickly, go ahead and highlight that. Say, do you know what? That was really incredible. I really appreciated that. And this one's the hard one. So individuals and expertise. Almost all of you have left a role or left a project because you weren't properly being valued. And you need to understand your own skill and value. And this sounds really simple, like, hey, you need to know how valuable you are. But going back to the Dunning-Kruger effect, our brains are terrible at self-assessment. We have no idea how good we are relative to our peers, unless we're sort of right at that sweet spot. But it's not just so we're being properly rewarded. It's not just so we're being properly paid. It's so we're very literally doing what our brains need. Does anybody know about the zone of proximal development? So this is a language learning concept which I'm absolutely in love with. The zone of proximal development is this idea that your brain has a sweet spot. So that if you're working on tasks, whether language learning tasks or technology tasks, if you're working on tasks that are too easy, you get no meaningful learning done. You can do the thing, but your brain doesn't have any value there. For fellow geeks, I try and talk about this as if you're playing an RPG, it's about a lot like going around and bopping the low-level monsters. You get 2 or 3 experience points, but there's no value in that. Just move up to the next map. Counter on the other side, if you're doing things that are too difficult, if you're working on tasks that are too high above your level, you can't really do the thing. You're not getting any work done. That's not satisfying. But you're also doing really serious damage to your motivation. If you're coming in, day out, and trying to engage with material, whether or not it's work or learning or anything you're doing, if you're trying to do things that are too far above your level, nothing's going to happen. You can pop up very high above your level with a great deal of mentorship and support. You can jump up there to preview things. But really, you need to drop back down to this sweet spot. The zone of proximal development says you want to be just one level up from where you're doing. So when you're asking that employers or when you're asking that projects appreciate your skill level, you're asking for them to give you things, to give you tasks that make you a more valuable asset. Of course it's selfish. Of course you want the recognition you deserve. But it's also altruistic. You're actively looking to make yourself a more valuable resource, even though that's a bit creepy sounding. But I think at the end of the day, getting what you deserve is so in a nice way, not getting what you deserve is so valuable. I think additional transparency around that. So who here thinks you've been underpaid as opposed to somebody who is not as skilled as you? We've got fewer hands, but the hands that are up are real sassy. Oh, and 2 like adorable guys in the middle will be like, I want everybody to get what they deserve in a really meaningful way. Selfishly, I want you to get paid better. I want you to get the recognition you deserve. I want those of you who are the shining stars of the Java world to be recognized if you like the limelight. But also, it's going to give you space to learn. It's going to put your brain in that sweet spot if you're constantly being giving level-appropriate tasks. It will quite literally make you a better technologist if people recognize your value. I tell mentees this, so people I work with one-on-one around mentorship, I always tell them that right now, someone who's less skilled than you is getting paid more than you. And I think the further you go up the chain, the more likely that is to happen. And this should probably make you feel a little bit angry and gently disgusted, but also a little bit motivated. So there's no reason outside of giant overarching structural issues and the way we value technology, skill and technology, outside of those little tiny things, there's no reason that you shouldn't be properly appreciated. How to fix it as an individual. How to fix things if you're not being properly appreciated. And this one gets a little bit choppy fast. Self-promotion is a skill. So who here would like to spend more time like getting better at self-promotion? Wait, come see me after this, especially if you want to get started talking. I will give you like a to-do. Self-promotion's a great skill. Who doesn't care about self-promotion and just wants to do the thing? Yeah. And you shouldn't be penalized for wanting to pour your energies into the thing you're good at. You shouldn't pour your energies into the thing that people are hiring you for. You should be valued for that on its own. Unfortunately, unrewarded talent's going to leave your teams if you're not rewarding them properly. Unrewarded talent is going to leave your communities. But if you're unrewarded talent and you're not able or not willing or you don't have the time to learn to better self-promote, you probably need to leave. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, but I wanted to end on a slide from this morning's keynote. I said, you'll probably have to leave, especially if you've got Dunning-Kruger folks in your office, or God forbid Dunning-Kruger folks is your boss. If you do have to leave, it is not your fault. It is not your problem. We incur massive costs in technology by not valuing the skill sets of others. We incur massive costs by not recognizing the people who build valuable things for us. If folks don't have the common sense to respect what you're doing, you just gotta go. Thank you very much. We've got just a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to come up and have a chat with me or just yell at me if you fancy it.